Hello and welcome to episode number 47 of the Wondrous Stuff Vodcast, broadcast live on Google Hangouts on air every weekend. This is the place you'll find news, commentary and information on science, engineering and technology subjects from the past, from beyond, the future, anyway. Anything else that interests us from inside? I've scrubbed that out. Anyway, basically, strange one this weekend. Another double header, not with Ross this time, with Richard. And so say hello, chap.
Hello, chap.
Richard's... Ross is off on a bonfire. I mean, would you miss Wondrous Stuff for a bonfire? Evidently, yes.
Depends on what kind of bonfire, I would say.
So it's a double header, so it might be short, it might be long. Richard and I can normally stretch things out, so it might be the same as normal. But I've only got we've only got two topics on cards here, but of course we will tend to ramble. So I'll start off with mine this week, and it's about brains. Actually, I was watching. You'll probably know this, Richard, because you have small children. There's a program on ITV in the morning called Horrible Science.
Yeah.
Have you seen that? Which I think is absolutely brilliant. It's based on the books, but it's Ben Miller has organised it. Well, today actually was about brains, but I had already decided to do this by then. But quite fortuitously, it was on this morning, and I learned loads of stuff about brains.
That's a good reminder. Actually, I always forget about ITV. I normally go between the BBC and Channel 5, funnily enough, for kids' programming.
Yeah, so 9 o'clock on Sunday mornings, Horrible Science. Great. I mean, just silly, but, you know, even adults can learn stuff about it, so it's really good. Anyway, so this I've got a couple of little small stories here. But hopefully they're like start off points for a little bit more discussion, because I know you like brain stuff, don't you? It's one of your areas that you quite like. So anyway, this is essentially both of these little topics are about an area of the brain called the hippocampus. Now, this morning, Horrible Science did remind me that the hippocampus looks like a seahorse, and so I thought, see if I got a picture of the hippocampus and a seahorse. And I do. There is a hippocampus, and there is the seahorse. So they do look like a seahorse. And just to give you a little idea where it is actually in the brain, if you look, it's the red bits, and there's one on either side, and that is the hippocampus. Lovely. Now, so the hippocampus itself is normally associated with the consolidation of information from the short-term to the long-term memory, so when it's passing from one stage to the next stage. It's also involved in spatial navigation, and supposedly it's the area where you link emotions to the senses, supposedly. Now, this story is about to blow myths that women have had for years. And the myth is that the perception from the brains that brains are different between a man and a woman. Their brains are different, particularly the hippocampus. Now, some women have said in the past that their hippocampus is bigger in a woman because it's proportional to their alleged ability to remember events in greater detail with heightened awareness and emotions. Well, they've carried out a study. Now, a study of studies. Now, I like these things. So this is where they're not. The group of scientists have got together, and they're not actually doing the experiment, but they're collating loads of experiments that have been done over the subjects over the years.
So it's a meta-analysis.
It's a meta-analysis. Yeah, it is. But the great thing about this is that the people who are doing this meta-analysis can't be. There's no suggestion that they falsified the the actual experiment, because they didn't take the experiment. So there's Dr. Lise Elliott, who's an associate professor of neuroscience at Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science, and it's published in the Neuroimage Journal. What they did was, and her team they took 76 published research papers over a number of years, and these 76 research papers had more than 6,000 people involved in their individual experiments. So they conducted a comprehensive review. So they used the meta-analysis statistical evaluation across all of these studies. And essentially, they came to the conclusion that there is no statistical difference between a male brain, or especially the hippocampus, and a female hippocampus.
I find that unsurprising myself.
Yeah, I think it's, if you've got a logical background and if you've done a little bit of reading around the topic, you could quite easily come to that conclusion. But I think they did it because there is a lot of published material that states otherwise.
Yeah.
So and the previous research inferred otherwise, but they were often based. There was some sort of anomaly in the way they did the science. Basically, they're based on small samples or whatever.
Yeah, exaggerated emphasis put on certain things.
I think so. Yeah. But I think what they set out to do was basically be all end all. This is the end of it. And I think they categorically basically said that if you increase the amount of data sets, when you look at all of the data, the differences are either really trivial or just disappear completely.
So more or less balances out if you use a large enough data set, right?
Yeah. So and I think that's essentially the first thing.
It is important. You're right. It is so important. I almost feel like the Daily Mail should only be able to report stories on meta-analysis, because you have people thinking, I mean, we've touched on this a few times before, but that science is changing its mind all the time. And of course, science does change and adapt, of course, you want it to, but it doesn't perform U-turns every 5 minutes. But if that's the danger, if you report to the public this finding, then this finding, they're thinking, hang on. Whereas if you report these sorts of studies that you're talking about, it's taking 100 studies or whatever and giving you the consensus of those studies. It's well worth doing, isn't it?
It is. It's absolutely. And funny enough, I was listening to Radio 4 this week, and on PM they had a guy on who was took them to account about the way that I think there was a particular word which was epicenter. They were saying epicenter you're using it incorrectly, because they were saying that there was an earthquake, because there was an earthquake this week in I can't remember what country was it, in Pakistan. But anyway, there was an earthquake, and they were using the epicenter to be the place where the earthquake starts under the ground. They were saying that the epicenter was much further down. Well, the epicenter is by definition is the point on the surface.
Right.
So he was taking it into account, and he said, he says the problem is with the journalists, and I'm taking this, the reason why I brought this up is because what you were saying about the Daily Mail is the journalists are by and large arts graduates, and they pick up a phrase, they don't fully understand the phrase, they don't fully research the phrase, but then they start using it in common parlance.
Well, sometimes, though, is it not? I thought that is the accusation it's made, but is it not a bit like, when movies, when they use incorrect science, it's not that they haven't done their research. People point out, oh, no, that would never happen, the laws of physics, blah, blah. Well, I think the directors and stuff know that these days because they have researchers, but they just decide to go with what jars least against perceptions that are already out there. So I think that's why terms like epicenter get used wrong. Richter scale is no longer really used. But once it's in people's heads, you kind of have to, it's out there now and you kind of have to refer to it, don't you? So is some of it just that they purposely use the wrong word because that's the word that's out there, or that's the definition that's out there? It's bad. And I think probably more prestigious journals and stuff probably avoid it. But I think the rags, they'll just use the word that people are used to hearing, won't they?
Yeah, probably. You're possibly right. Obviously, all of these places, the mail and everything, they've got their area that they're writing for.
Yeah.
But
I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't do the fundamental research to find out. You know, at least Google epicenter before you put it in a piece. Well, surely they do at least that. You would
hope so. But going back to this, but it's a similar type of thing. Now, are they being inaccurate with what they publish? Because basically a story comes through on the wires. Now it's easy for them to just go, there you go, new one, straight in there. Easy copy for them.
Yeah.
Whereas perhaps, say, a magazine, something like The Independent or one of The Economist, or a magazine of a different level might do a little bit of research around the backstory as well. So they'll say, this has happened this week, we've got a new story, but this is in contrary to the last 5 studies.
Yeah.
Well, the Mail. I'm not just picking on the Mail, although I do like to pick on the Mail. I mean, it's a little hobby of mine. But you know, they do. They say, you know, that science has changed their mind again.
Yeah. Well, that's why we did this a little bit, didn't we, with the story that I did about where they retested all the psychological studies and found that out a lot of them were. I think what you need to do is 2 independent meta studies, and then if they both agree and they're in a large data set, then that to me, that is the modern version of the scientific consensus. That is as good as you're going to get to the consensus, isn't it? It's
true. I mean, like, you see, the thing is, now obviously meta studies, meta-analysis is going on all the time, but you very often don't get the news story that is it's the meta-analysis that's the
because it's not new. Because it's not new, is it? That's why I think the papers want something that's new. So they want a breakthrough headline, regardless whether it's against the consensus. They want to sell paper, so they want something that's new. And an analysis story isn't new, is it?
And also, but it's confirmation.
It's useful. It's more useful. Yeah. It's more useful than an isolated study that has a different finding, but it's not as sensational.
And also, do you think that the lot of the the research establishments have a PR slant that they have to put on things?
Yeah.
So all of the universities have got a PR department, and they'll all think, like, you know, they'll want to get something out there and put a spin on it and get it under the newspapers. Yeah. So they'll put a headline in their press release that has a particular, that, you know, a journalist would go, ooh, look, I've got a story out of this. I can get a story out of this. Whether this is like absolutely confirming that there's no difference. It's
as much as science ever will confirm. I mean, even that you've got to use the caveat that on current understanding. Yeah, and I guess even a meta-analysis probably is subject to some bias as well, isn't it? That you can't help but be biased when you're doing the analysis, I guess, to some extent.
I guess so. Well, I guess so, but if you
because presumably you're putting weighting on. Presumably you're not saying 10 studies and 9 studies, because number of studies surely isn't a very good metric to go by, because one could be very big and weighty and important and one could be small. So presumably at some point you need to make a value judgment of, do you know what I mean? Is this one a more comprehensive study than this one? Does this one carry a heavier weight? To come to, you know, when you were saying it evens out over the studies, presumably they're not saying 50 studies and 50 studies, presumably they're like weighting them.
Well, they said 76 studies. That's what they went out. There were 6,000 people over these 76 studies. And for statistical anomalies, you know, it's averages out as no change.
Yeah.
No difference.
Probably they do it on numbers then. They do numbers of people in the study then.
I would say so.
Right.
Yeah. It did, because it did specify the 6,000 people, so
right.
I guess more than the actual number of studies, it's the actual...
I suppose that's good enough, isn't it? If you've got a large enough sample size, and it's... I suppose if it's not statistically significant, it probably warrants no further. You probably only need to go further if it did say women were different in some way to men. Then you probably need to then follow it up.
That's obviously more analysis is needed if you get that. But if there's, but I mean, what they also found out, and I don't know whether they particularly found it out in this one, but what they've also found out is that these are other alleged differences that have are in common sort of belief that there are also myths, which is the corpus callosum, which is the area of the brain where it allows the brain's hemispheres to communicate with each other.
Right.
Again, the inference has been in the past that the women's corpus callosum is larger than men. It's not true. There is strong evidence also suggesting that asymmetry between a man and a woman's brains makes the brains of women more effective language processors. That's not true particularly. I mean, you know, I don't think this particular meta-analysis is done on these two, but these are also basically.
So you know that I guess what the public would ask, what the layperson would ask then is that there does seem to be things where women are better at them than men and vice versa. So academically, women at college age seem to be better than men across a broad range of subjects. So if that isn't to do with regions in the brain, are we saying that that's cultural then? Must be, if it's not explained by brain regions.
Yeah, so it's not. Well, I guess it's. Is it nurture? Is it something else? Is it? I'm
just wondering if it's. I'm just wondering if it's
environment?
still physiological, but not brains. Like, for instance, could it be hormone related? Could it be that, you know, testosterone's role, for example, just making this up, but could it be that testosterone makes men more distracted, and that alone is enough to show a statistical difference between men and women?
Or perhaps it's women that make men more distracted.
Well, yeah. But what I mean is, there has to be an explanation.
Yeah, there's got to be some sort of another external force, as it were.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely there's an identity thing, because my 2-year-old's already saying about girls in pink and things like that, and we've definitely not taught them that. In fact, we've tried to teach them the opposite and not draw a distinction between girls and boys. But society's just so set. You know, adverts are terrible for it.
Actually, today I was just saying that to my other half when we were watching Horrible Science, and the adverts before and after. It's incredible. It's and then
it's so sexist, isn't it? It's so sexist.
And then I was looking through a catalogue of Christmas gifts. I think it was a Tesco catalogue, and it's here's the girls' stuff, here's the boys' stuff.
It's when they have
still now.
It's when they have science stuff and the boys' toys. Like, that is absolutely not acceptable this day and age to do that.
I know. It's
but you can see how if you do that from an early age, even at a small amount, just in advertising, that then creates gender roles, and then you would then expect, well, if women think they should be better at this and men think they should be better at this, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy almost, isn't it?
You know, there's still in this catalogue that I was looking at today, there is a picture of a girl with a pushchair. This is exactly the same thing that we had in the 70s.
Yeah.
Where all girls had dolls.
Which is fine as long as you show a boy with one.
Yeah. But of course there isn't that.
Yeah. But my son was saying, was on about dollies. He was saying, you wanted a boy dolly? And I'm like, well, a dolly's just a dolly. It doesn't matter which one it is. But then you think, you know, as much as we want him to have whatever he wants, in that sense, it's a stigmatism, isn't it? That then if he's playing with girl dollies, people infer what that means and stuff like that, and you just kind of end up avoiding that situation. But then you think to yourself, well, why should I? If he wants a dolly, let him have one.
Yeah, and also why even, you know, when I was growing up, all of my toys were, you know, I had cars, but all of my dollies were action figures with guns.
Yeah.
And I feel really bad about that now, because I didn't ask for.
I think all boys are obsessed with like toy guns and that. But then you wonder, is that in your programming, or is that your parents falling foul of just carrying on the cycle?
Well, you know, I had Action Men.
Yeah.
And I was never, I've never been interested in guns. I've never been interested in blowing things up. And you know, I'm still not now particularly. But yet that was the only options that I had for me then. with these sort of warmongering.
And it hasn't changed that much.
It hasn't. It's scary. You know, they've gotten more advanced. They've got, you put batteries in them now. They've got little electronic circuits in them now, but they're the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite tragic, really. That coming from my youth to, you know, I'm a 43-year-old man now, and I haven't seen. There's no change. There's change everywhere else. There's no change here.
It's just cultural legacies. It's really hard to shake off, isn't it?
Really quite depressing.
But that is a really interesting study, and my vote is for more of those kind of studies, because I think the findings of them are possibly more important than breakthrough studies.
Yeah, but you see, it's from a point of view of a journalist. It's well,
the editor's
a negative study.
The editor's going to be saying, "Well, what's new about this? We've done this before. And what are you bringing that's new?" And the answer's nothing.
Yeah. But like you say, it's very, very useful as a piece of science, and statistical analysis is a huge part of it, and really important, and getting that right. And you could quite easily, you know, skew something if you don't get it right.
Because this is going on at the moment with bacon and processed meat and things like that. That there's a lot of people I've noticed on social media saying, "Well, what will they say next?" And it's, you know, this list has been built up slowly over time. It's not like it's changing and it's swapping around. And, you know, these concerns about processed meats have been around for a long time.
You know, and I think it was the same with cigarettes in the 40s and 50s. People were slowly, you know, physicians and scientists were slowly coming to even back then, that there's something not quite right with tobacco.
Yeah.
And inhaling it, and there's starting to see clustering around, you know, certain areas. And what are the difference? Well, they all seem to smoke. And it wasn't until you got into the 60s where there was actual you know, fundamental conclusive evidence starting to appear. But that hadn't just come overnight. That was many, many years of people finding little clusters and little pointers towards this. And it's the same in all sciences like that. You know, you very rarely will you get a scientific endeavor where they start doing a bit of research and at the end of it, it's like, ooh, conclusive proof. First little, you won't get that.
I don't want to be too evangelical about it, and you risk sounding that way. But, you know, science really, in finding out what's true, it is the only game in town, really. If you're a rational person, the only real way to find out whether something's true or not is to do the science, isn't it? And it just kind of annoys me that, you know, when you think back then, how did the tobacco companies have as much say in it, and their supporters have as much say in it as the science did, if not more? But even so now, like, a lot of stuff you're hearing, you know, the science and then the meat industry or associated things having their say on an equal stage. And it's like, but you should only be listening. The science is the only thing that matters. And the fact that the UN are now taking it on board 10 years after the fact, well, that's great. But you know what I mean? It's not really, to me, it's not really open for debate. Why are we having a debate about it? The science has already had the debate 10 years ago and found that it's a class 1 carcinogenic. Yeah. So, you know, the science has already been done, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Although in this case, I think it's a little bit weak, isn't it? Because it's like a population study type of thing. More needs to be done, but yeah, that's really interesting. That finding that you've come up with is really good.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is another story here, but actually I read it this morning and I thought that might be something to, because it's all about the hippocampus as well. But I've read it again and there's not much of a story there actually. It's basically that there's 2 universities in Germany, and they've put a journal in, Cell Reports, and basically what they're saying is that previous knowledge, previous thought process around how short-term memory works, and how remembering over short-term memory is a lot more complicated than they first thought. They thought that it didn't really use the hippocampus that much for short-term memory. It was only when it was transferring it into long-term that they were starting to use the hippocampus. But what they've found out is they used some epilepsy patients who already registered epileptic, and they'd already had. Now, this bit I don't understand. There was no real background to how this came about, but these epilepsy patients already had electrodes implanted into the hippocampus. They said for the purpose of surgical planning. Don't know how that fits in. So they were using these electrodes to scan brain function when,
right.
yeah. So basically, what they did was they got these epileptic patients to memorize sequence of faces and numbers, and they observed that there was 2 activity states in the hippocampus when this was happening. Now, previously they thought that this would not affect the hippocampus because it was just like, here's a series of stuff, you only need to remember it for 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
It shouldn't really affect it, but they noticed that twice a second the hippocampus alternated these states, and it became like an excited or a less excited state. So what they're thinking now is that there's a, you know, they were oversimplifying how it all worked before, and it's a lot more complicated than that.
I think that's the case for a lot of neuroscience, is that the models of this region for this and this region for that, we're increasingly finding that they're outmoded because it's a lot more cross-functional than, but a bit like a lot of organs in the body. You know, that they've got a minor role that we didn't realise before. Do you know what I mean? So yes, that brain region is mainly it, but this brain region plays a part, and the whole thing together is a network. So you know what I mean? You need all the bits for it to function as you would expect.
And I think they're finding out now, certainly from things like this, is that they were thinking, right, it's a simple process. You remember this, and they were trying to simplify it and say, well, that region is just for this, but it's not. It's a huge, complicated interaction of many of the areas of the brain.
Yeah.
And I think that's possibly in some way they didn't want to believe that. They didn't want to think that it was that complicated, because I think it probably proves how little they know about the whole thing.
I know it's often talked about in terms of Alzheimer's, isn't it? The hippocampus, because it's the first one. It is the first or one of the first to be affected. And that's why people become emotionally unstable and stuff like that, and disorientated and stuff. We talked about it as well. I think it was me who did the story, I can't remember now, but about, you know, the mice in the maze one.
That's
and
right, yeah.
The place cells, where literally means where it stores knowledge of a place, their hippocampus region as well.
Yeah. It's interesting. Though, I mean, the whole brain is still a unfathomable, complicated beast of things.
People who have strokes or have been oxygen starved or whatever, if have had some kind of asphyxia and survived, the hippocampus, I know, is sensitive to that. So if your oxygen gets cut short, it can be badly damaged quite easily. So it must be like an oxygen-rich part of the brain that gets easily affected by that. So it obviously does involve a lot of processing, isn't it? Yeah,
because it's very close to the as the spinal cord comes up. It's the region. It's right in the middle, isn't it, of the brain, of where all that.
So it's like the old brain, like where ancestors had that part.
Yeah, absolutely. But interesting. The whole thing's quite interesting. Right. So I think we'll probably leave that there, because we're doing quite well for time. I didn't think we wouldn't like, but we're past now, so it's perfect time. Halfway through to go to yours, Richard, and this is how animal friends are helping in the battle against cancer.
Yeah, mine's actually the first bit of my story is the bit that's in the news this week. I want to just talk about two animals, but the first one relates to the brain. It's scorpions. A neurotoxin from scorpions is being used. So this is Jim Olson, who's a pediatric oncologist, and it's the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle. They've basically come up with a tumour paint. So an issue has been in the past, when you're operating on tumours, particularly in the brain, the surgeon is very reluctant to take off any more than necessary, as you'd imagine, because you're taking off live brain tissue.
This is why a lot of the brain, because there's no nerves in the brain. Is that correct? they can't feel pain, so they try and keep the patient awake as often as possible.
That's right. You have ones where they're playing the violin and stuff like that.
Getting them to sing and getting them to recite stuff, so they know if they're affecting,
Which isn't always possible, of course. If you're going into certain parts of the brain, you just simply can't do that.
Plus the fact that if you've got an accident victim in who is already unconscious, So
but a tumour as well, it's it can be a very long operation. It's just not practical to keep the person awake and stuff like that. And I suppose you might not want them awake for various reasons. But anyway, this toxin that come from scorpions, I've written down the name of it. Chlorotoxin, which is found in scorpion venom. It's being tested in clinical trials now. And basically what they've used it for is it attaches to cancer cells. So it can't be used to treat them. It's just not for that, basically. It's just not, it doesn't destroy cancer cells. But anyway, it is a toxin. It is toxic to humans. So you've got to be careful in its application.
So when you say a paint, do they actually apply it onto the surface of the tumour?
Yeah, they apply it to the area, and it basically, the cancer, it flags it up. It tattoos the tumour, if you like. So then it's clear to the surgeon what he can cut and what he can't cut.
What visually?
Visually.
How bizarre.
Yeah, so it lights it up for him effectively. So this guy seems like a real character, Jim Olsen, and worth looking up. He's actually got the tattoo of the knot of bonds tattooed onto his upper arm. He's that into it, but it's huge. It's a huge thing.
I guess the natural question that arises from when you have things like this is, how did they find that out?
Yeah.
How did they think? How did they find out that this neurotoxin bonded to and highlighted cancer?
I've got no idea, but they're exploring a lot of applications for it. I know that that venom and cancer, it gets talked about a lot. So I've got no idea.
They've obviously got breakdown of the chemical components of these things.
I guess at a molecular level they interact in some way, shape, or form. Yeah.
And does it? Well, obviously, does it make another chemical up, or does it make does it have?
Do they react in some way? I'm not sure whether they react. Well, yeah, I guess at a chemical level they must react because that's how it's signaling the difference. Yeah, they must do.
Incredible.
Yeah.
You see, now I hadn't heard that story at all, so that's a new one on me.
It was most popular on The Guardian when I was looking for something to do. I thought, I can't find anything. What's most popular? And but yeah, a story from a while back, which is now being trailed by the NHS. I remember hearing this on another the Stuff You Should Know podcast a few years back, when we first year at Tagish, so it was a while back, about dogs that can smell cancer. Now, this one is really true. It sounds like it shouldn't be, but the NHS are actually trialing it now. It's been approved for use by the NHS.
There is a dog training charity, isn't there, for like an RNIB and
that's right. And it's particular cancers. I think it's urinary tract and prostates that they're very good at sniffing out. But yeah, they can smell the antigen that the cancer generates. So and
this is quite simple fact here that because dogs have got orders of magnitude higher receptors on their nose than that we have.
That's right.
These smells are there, but we just have no way of smelling it if we didn't use animals.
And the thing with this is as well, the patient doesn't have to be involved because you take a urine sample and the dogs are being trained to smell it in the urine. So presumably you would have thought they could then get this technology at some point in the future and you wouldn't then need the dogs. But basically in the first study that's been done by the NHS in this country, they found that the trained dogs are 93% accurate. Now, that's great because the traditional methods of detecting prostate cancer and other types of cancer are very poor. So it's 93% is astonishingly high. I mean, that sounds like, you think, 7% failure rate, is that acceptable? Some of the breast cancer tests and stuff like that are barely 50%.
Yeah.
So it's really, really high. So the way this works is the volatiles the cancer volatiles travel from infected cells into the urine as the body tries to get rid of them, and that's what they think. So they don't even know. So they don't even know how the dog's doing it.
So the volatiles are the similar thing that you would have in paint on the volatile organic compounds.
Yeah.
That's the sort of stuff.
But this is the volatiles created by the body's metabolic process to get rid of it. So when the body disposes of it, they're still free floating, and they believe that if there's enough of them, the dog can then smell it in the urine. And the dog's just trained to react to smelling that particular odour. So you can see it's relatively easy to train for as well, because all you have to do is get the compounds and train the dog. Look, this is what you're smelling for, and if the dog's smelling it in the same way as we would smell a bag of crisps, then it's relatively easy to train the dog to do it.
When you think of the amount of different smells that a dog can take in, you're just pointing them to the ones that you want them to react on, aren't you?
Yeah.
It must, their nose must just be rampant with smells every day.
Well, it's easier for them as well, because you think, oh, well, they've got a greater range to keep track of, so it must be harder. But they're also better at isolating the individual smells as well. Yeah. So they're just better at, the famous one, well, not the famous one, but the one that I find humorous is like, if someone thinks they're smelling either a fart or a beef dinner, it's like the two smells really, one's very pleasant, one's horrible, but yet they're easily confused. The dog will never make that mistake. No. It knows exactly which is which.
But then you see things like this. When you pick these stories up, that the animal is clearly better than doing it than us, and yet we still have this self-importance about humans are the be-all and end-all, and just because we've got opposable thumbs and a huge ego.
But also some of it isn't our fault, because some of it is you can only see through a human lens. You can only sort of compare to yourself, because you've got no other, we haven't lived as another animal than a human. So
unless
some of that's inevitable. Yeah. Well, if you believe in reincarnation, you might have done. But no, you still won't have done. But you'll believe that you have. No, but that we've talked about before, that you try not to anamorphize with animals when you do scientific studies. But in some ways, your frame of reference is life as a human. So in some ways, it's difficult, isn't it? I suppose you can't any objective measure you can. But any sort of subjective experience, trying to describe what it's like to see, 10 times magnitude more colours like a mantis shrimp can, or 10 times magnitude more smell like a bloodhound can. It's hard to imagine, isn't it? What it would be like to see, 10 times as many colours. It's impossible to put yourself in that. But of course they can.
Yeah, absolutely, and some is it the mantis shrimp that not only has the full visual spectrum like we do, but they've also got infrared or something. Or
yeah. So they see more colours between, and they see a larger spectrum. So they see ultraviolet and infrared. So they go right into those spectrums as well.
Wow,
crazy. But they're beautiful to look at, they're very colourful to look at, but they see themselves even, can you imagine how spectacular they are to each other? They're spectacular looking to us, to each other, they must look absolutely incredible.
But I think it was, wasn't it, it was the chicken as well, the humble chicken has much greater visual range than we have.
All right, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was watching something during the week, and they were showing you how a sheep would view something, how a dog would view something.
Because most mammals are poorer than us, aren't they?
Yeah, they do. I think they were saying that basically the common perception is that sort of dogs are monochromatic.
Yeah,
but that's not strictly true. They do see colours. They don't see the full range of colours. They do see some colours, and they're very muted.
Yeah, it's a bit. Is it not similar to a colourblind person? Like the one that's on the male gene. Yeah.
I think it's something like that. Yeah, they don't see some of the colours, but they'll see some other ones, but they're very muted. So it looks like if you were to see it, you'd say, well, that's black and white.
Yeah.
But it's not. It's the colours. They're just very small spectrum of colours.
There's some good pictures you can see on the internet. I remember seeing them in a book as a kid, and like a garden or a scene as a dog would see it. And obviously it's some guesswork in there, but where they've toned down the colours to the level, and you see it's kind of like an old photograph, isn't it? Like the first colour photographs where the colours are very muted.
That's right. Well, the example that they were shown here was how a sheep, was it either a sheep or a cow, in a field. Now, as we saw the field, and we saw patches of lush green grass and patches of very poor grass, so like a dry grass. But because of the way that the sheep sees it, they just see one tone throughout.
Even though it would be a much bigger advantage for them to see different.
Well, they must. The inference is that they must use a different sense to find out what the
like
good
smell
grass.
or something.
Yeah,
right.
yeah. So they must know, because they don't eat the bad grass.
Right.
They can't see the bad grass, so they must use smell or
right.
taste or whatever.
Right. I mean, that's normally what it is that you can, if one sense is bad, like birds' hearing is poor, so most birds see very well, or at least predatory birds do, but their hearing is poor.
But that's also when they tweet, they've got, that's their frequency.
Yeah, on that spectrum. Yeah. That's right.
So they can't hear the white noise around it, but they can hear the high pitched, and that's obviously, well, that's all they really need to know. They don't need to hear a car alarm going off. They only need to, unless it confuses them. That might confuse them.
But yeah, back to the animals detecting cancer and what have you. That episode of stuff you should know is definitely worth checking out, because they talk about dogs that can detect epilepsy in people before they have an attack, which is obviously a lifesaver for those people. So those people are then able to drive a car because they know that the dog reliably is going to tell them 4 hours before the attack kicks in that they're going to have attack, because the precursors are detectable by the dog that long before. And also they talk about a cat. I don't know how substantiated this one is, but there was a cat at a nursing home that used to go and visit people.
I've heard that story.
Yeah, I think I might have told it before. But basically, cell death.
Sit on the lap of
the
people who were going to die.
Yeah, and the theory behind that is that, or the hypothesis behind that is that that maybe the cell death that's occurring, because a person does start dying before they die, if you like. So clearly we know signs that somebody's, the doctor will say this person has 12 hours to live. So when someone's dying in a lot of cases. But animals can probably, if you could look at a cellular level, you would know that person, if you took it to if you took the slide of the blood sample and stuff, they do know that you're dying. So presumably what's happening there is a cat or a dog or whatever is smelling the cell death well ahead of time.
And for the avoidance of doubt, cells are being created and dying all the time.
Yeah.
But obviously when it gets to the stage where you've got more cells dying than you're getting created, that's the spiral.
Presumably what's happening is the cell death has like a background smell. And
like a cell radiation, as it were.
Yeah. But just interesting that, no sixth sense nonsense, but just heightened in the same senses that we have, to some fundamental level. They just have a very heightened sense of that. It's just interesting to have another perspective, that they perceive the world that we live in a different way. I think it's interesting to think about, isn't it?
Absolutely, it is indeed. And that is a perfect closer to the show. Bang on time. It's almost as if we planned it. And that is another episode of number 47 of The Wonder of Stuff, over and done. This week, by pure coincidence, we've talked a lot about brains and smell and stuff like that. So that's quite cool. As always, we readily accept any of your feedback. We've got the email address. You've got the handles, the Twitter handles we've got on screen. Got the email address, wonderofstuff@gmail.com. We've got the blog, wonderofstuff.blogspot.com. Actually, what I'm thinking of doing is, you were mentioning some other podcasts.
Yeah.
I think we should start putting some other ones on that we listen to.
Yeah.
I know I listen to there's Naked Scientists one,
right,
which is quite good, and then there's a Sci Show which
yeah, I listen to that.
There's a few of those
YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Well, Rationally Speaking is one that I would highly recommend, and Chuck and Larry's Stuff You Should Know is worth checking out.
And obviously the some of the BBC ones, the podcast, the science one, and More or Less as well, which I listen to.
And the Infinite Monkey
I love More or Less.
Infinite Monkey Cage is good as well.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll get some of that on there as well. Obviously, we've still got the Vodcast, so you've got the YouTube archive of everything that we've done. We've also got the audio cast, so there's an RSS feed on the Blogspot homepage, on our Blogspot homepage. And what we're going to do, hopefully, by the time we get to the 52nd episode, which will be our first birthday, we will change. I'm hoping to change the domain name, so we've got palindrome.com. No, I said it again. That's my domain. We've got wonderstuff.com. I don't think there is a way of keeping wonderstuff.blogspot.com and going to wonderstuff.com. So we might have to make the change there and then. And also, I'm expecting to sort of register a lot of our with the iTunes and a lot of the other podcast directories as well, to hopefully get a bit more traffic, because it's been going down recently. Not happy about that. I think what we'll have to do, Richard, is and I realise you've got a lot of things on at the moment, but when you did went into the YouTube sessions and put different topics on.
Yeah, all I've been doing recently is just doing the titles, but I need to do a bit more on the description.
Yeah, because that definitely does push things up.
That could explain some of the drop off, I think. Yeah, but also YouTube has changed the counts of signed in people, so I think everyone's traffic will have dropped as a result of that. But yeah.
Anyway, enough of our yakking away about administrivia here that you don't need to know about. We'll talk about that offline. Anyway, so we've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed it. Until next time, we'd just like to say goodbye.
Bye.